You're here now, settled beneath a paper lantern's glow, in a quiet little wooden room tucked between yesterday and a dream. Outside, rain whispers on rooftops, soft as silk being folded. And inside, well, inside it's warm, dim, and smells faintly of ink, old wood, and roasted tea. You've wandered far to get here, across the centuries, past the noise of now. And tonight, you've arrived in 18th century Edo, what we now call Tokyo, when it was still a city of sliding doors, floating worlds, and stories drawn in line and wash. This is not a place of loud emperors or battlefields. This is a place of art, of detail, of delicate absurdity. A world where brush and block print turned the everyday into something gently strange. And perhaps nowhere stranger than in the studios of the ukiyo-e artists. Ukiyo-e means pictures of the floating world, a poetic term for the vibrant, fleeting pleasure of life. Kabuki actors, geisha, tea houses, riverside strolls, and occasionally cats. But not just any cats. Cats dressed as people. Cats drinking sake. Cats playing shamisen. Cats acting in full theatrical dramas with tiny paws and perfect posture. Yes, really. And no, it wasn't a mistake. They did it on purpose. You probably won't make it through this whole episode, at least not consciously. And that's okay. You're not here for hard facts or exams. You're here for a gentle tumble through soft paper dreams. So, before we truly begin, if your eyes are already growing heavy, let them. If you haven't subscribed, do that quietly. No one minds if it's after a nap. And tell us in the comments, where are you listening from? What time is it where you are? We love knowing where in the world sleep finds you. Now let's ease into tonight's story. Let's drift together into a world where cats wore robes, performed kabuki, and probably judged us silently from across the tatami floor. You walk through a narrow side street, the kind where umbrellas pass just inches apart and no one raises their voice. Shutters are closed for the night, save for one studio glowing with candlelight. You slide the door gently open, and there he is, the artist, seated cross-legged at a low desk, surrounded by brushes, pots of ink, and a stack of half-finished woodblock prints. His name is Utagawa Kunyoshi, and tonight he's giggling to himself. Not maliciously, not manically, just with the quiet satisfaction of someone who's just drawn a very detailed cat with a sword and a topknot. Kunyoshi was one of the ukiyo-e greats, bold, inventive, sometimes irreverent. And yes, he had a thing for cats. They wandered his studio, sat on his lap while he sketched, knocked over his inkstones with the calculated chaos of feline critics. And he didn't just tolerate them. He painted them, constantly. Sometimes as cats, sometimes as samurai, sometimes as courtesans, and sometimes as cat-shaped versions of people he disliked. A little shade, delicately applied. You lean over one of his prints. It's a group of cats, standing upright, wearing traditional robes, faces alert with the kind of mild disapproval cats have perfected over millennia. They're reenacting scenes from famous kabuki plays. One holds a fan, one draws a tiny sword, one appears to be dramatically fainting. The detail is astonishing and gently ridiculous, and yet, somehow, dignified. Historians still debate whether Kunyoshi meant these works as satire, sincere tribute, or simply the product of an overworked artist with a studio full of cats and too much tea. You wander to the window. Outside, another cat, perches on the wall, watching, always watching. Maybe tomorrow, she'll appear in a print, balancing a teacup or wagging a fan at some unseen lover. In Edo, cats don't just sleep in sunbeams. They dance. They act. They quietly take over entire art forms without asking permission. And no one seems to mind. You step deeper into the studio, your footsteps hushed against the woven tatami floor. A pot of ink sits beside you, still warm from use. Its surface gleams in the low candlelight, like a moon puddled in black. And beside it, a freshly carved block of cherry wood, faintly dusted in wood shavings. Kuniyoshi has stepped out, probably to pet one of his 6 cats or to nap with his face in a pile of rice crackers, but his presence lingers in every unfinished line. You kneel beside a stack of prints. One catches your eye, a procession of cats dressed as Edo-era townsfolk. One wears a straw hat 3 sizes too large. Another balances a basket of radishes. A third lounges beneath a paper umbrella as if she's late for an appointment she has no intention of attending. And there's something familiar about it. You realize it's a parody, a recreation of a famous scene, humans replaced by cats, mannerisms intact, satire subtle and sleepy. This was a known technique in ukiyo-e, to comment, to tease, to sneak critique past the censors in paws and whiskers. Cats, after all, could say what humans weren't allowed to. They were tricksters, observers, quiet anarchists with perfect posture. One image in particular stands out. A group of cats gambling beneath a cherry blossom tree, looking far too smug for their own good. One of them is clearly cheating, but no one says a word. Some scholars believe this print mocked corrupt officials. Others say it was just a really good joke. Still others argue that the cats weren't metaphors at all, just cats, drawn by someone who loved them and found their every movement inherently dramatic. And honestly, all those explanations feel true. You lean closer. The paper smells faintly of smoke and time and just a whisper of sardines. You smile. Here, even the jokes are quiet. Even the art, purring softly in its sleep. Outside, the rain has softened into mist, and the streets of Edo hum with night. You leave Kuniyoshi's studio and drift down a narrow alley where lanterns swing gently, like thoughts you haven't fully formed yet. On the walls, posted prints flutter like sleepy flags. More cats. Always more cats. One yawns behind a rice paper screen. Another sips from a sake dish, pink tongue mid-lap. A third appears to be writing a poem and judging itself harshly. You pass a shopfront, the local print seller. Behind the window, neat stacks of ukiyo-e wait to be carried home, hung, admired, or forgotten. A young woman is browsing. She's wearing a deep indigo kimono patterned with tiny paw prints. Coincidence? Probably not. She holds up a print, a group of cat samurai, solemn and fluffy, marching into a tea house. She giggles. You feel it too, this mix of the absurd and the precise, of art that doesn't try too hard to be serious, but is, in its quiet way, utterly sincere. The shopkeeper, half asleep on a cushion, opens one eye and says, "Kuniyoshi again. That one's popular, brings good dreams," and then closes his eye, presumably to continue having one himself. You flip through a few prints yourself.
One shows cats in a noodle shop mid-meal. Another lounging across scrolls and open books, like miniature scholars who know they're smarter than you. And finally, a single portrait, a dignified tabby in formal robes, holding a calligraphy brush, gazing directly at the viewer. It's a self-portrait of sorts, not of Kuniyoshi the man, but of Kuniyoshi the spirit, the artist who found honesty in exaggeration, who used cats to say what humans couldn't, who drew a world soft enough to fall asleep in and clever enough to remember once you wake. You roll the print gently, tuck it beneath your arm. The streets stretch ahead, dim and winding, and somewhere in the back alleys of the floating world, a cat bows politely and disappears behind a curtain.
The moon has risen fully now. It hangs like a silver coin above the rooftops, casting gentle shadows that make even the laundry lines look poetic. You find yourself walking along the Sumida River, broad, slow, and lined with plum trees. The blossoms are past their peak, but still soft, like memories that won't quite leave. And here, at the water's edge, sits another artist. Not Kuniyoshi this time. This one is older, quieter, and wrapped in a robe that seems to contain 1,000 brushstrokes itself. Her name is Shizuno. Few today remember her, but back then, she was one of the few female artists quietly practicing in private, carefully, brilliantly, and sometimes under borrowed names. She didn't print widely, didn't chase fame, but oh, she painted cats. Cats as tea sellers, cats in mid-dance, cats walking through rain in tiny straw sandals, the print titled, "They hate it, but they do it anyway." You sit beside her now. She doesn't greet you with words, just pours 2 cups of tea, sets one beside you, and continues drawing, her brush barely whispering across the page. The image forming, 2 cats in a boat, one rowing, one gazing at the moon. A quiet scene, a floating world within the floating world. She pauses. Then, very softly, she says, "People come and go, but cats, they always know where the warmth is." You nod, because it's true, even if you're not sure what it means. She chuckles gently. Kuniyoshi drew their theater. I draw their quiet. You sip the tea. It tastes like rice, wind, and a little sleep. And you realize something. This isn't just art. It's a lullaby in ink, a bedtime story for the eyes. You sit with Shizuno for a while longer, saying nothing. And in that silence, even the river forgets to rush. Later, perhaps minutes, perhaps hours, you find yourself in a small neighborhood tucked beneath a hill. The houses here are smaller, older, more weathered by time and gently ignored by the city's faster currents. One of them has a garden full of bamboo. Another has laundry hanging like soft flags of domestic peace. And then you spot it. A small wooden sign shaped like a paw print. It reads, Nekomimi Za, Theater of the Cat-Eared. A tiny, forgotten playhouse. You slide the door open and step inside. The air's thick with dust and stage makeup. The curtains are velvet, faded from crimson to something closer to old wine. And in the middle of the stage,
A single mask. It's feline, of course. Exaggerated whiskers, long painted eyes, a sly smile that seems to know your secrets and approve of them anyway. You sit in the front row. No one joins you. Then, very slowly, the lights dim and shadows dance across the stage. The play begins. It's not loud, not even theatrical, just silhouettes, painted on rice paper, moving across a lit screen. One cat bows, another kneels, a third pulls out a fan and swoons dramatically into a cushion. It's a retelling of the tale of Genji, but fluffier. You watch, lulled by the soft music of a shamisen played half a room away. The story barely matters. What matters is the quiet effort, the detail, the pause, the joy of performance for its own sake. And when the curtain falls, without applause, without bows, you realize something important. Someone, long ago, cared enough to create this. Not for fame, not for power, just to make the world a little softer. And maybe to give cats something else to laugh at us about. You emerge from the little theater like someone waking from a nap within a nap. Outside, the night deepens, but not in a scary way, more like a blanket being tucked higher over your shoulders. The street lamps flicker like sleepy eyes trying not to close yet. You walk past a noodle stand still steaming at this hour. A man with a sleepy grin offers you a bowl without asking what you want. "You look like you've just watched the cats perform," he says. You nod, sipping slowly. He leans on the counter. "He say those cat prints are lucky, you know. Hang one near your futon, and the dreams get quieter, slower." He gestures to the back wall, where, of course, there's a framed ukiyo-e print. It shows a cat reading a scroll, clearly pretending to understand it. Beside it, another cat stares straight at the viewer with an expression that says, "You're not going to do any of this, are you?" You smile. And here's something strange, but soft, so don't flinch. Cats were sometimes used as symbols of devotion, to comfort, to home, to pleasure, but also to transience. In Buddhist thought, even a cat in a print is a reminder life is fleeting. Pleasure is momentary. Nap while you can. You finish your noodles, bow in thanks, and walk again, just a little slower now. Every window you pass flickers with light, and in every one you're almost sure you see a cat. One playing a drum, one writing her letter, one curled around a pillow, purring so softly it hums in your own chest. There's something here, you think. A rhythm, a stillness, a truth whispered through whiskers, and it's starting to settle in your bones. You take a turn down a narrower alley now, the kind that feels like a shortcut in a dream, a little sideways, a little secret. At the end of it, there's a door half cracked open. You step in. Inside is a small archive. Scrolls, drawers, stacks of prints bundled with string. A few sleepy archivists, heads resting in their hands mid-sorting. One is definitely drooling onto a catalog. A quiet bell chimes as you enter, and a gray cat sitting on the counter gives you an unimpressed look. She does not move. You are clearly not interesting enough. The archivist blinks slowly, then hands you a portfolio without a word. Inside, more cats. But these are different, older, looser, from earlier artists. One riding a turtle, one wearing a hat shaped like Mount Fuji, one simply staring into space like it's contemplating existence. These weren't meant for sale. They were sketches, studies, gifts, jokes. The playful drawings passed between friends, between lovers, between teachers and students. One sheet is covered entirely in paws. Another shows the same cat drawn 15 times from different angles, sitting, stretching, judging, judging harder. And in the margins, there are notes. One reads, "Too round. Try again." Another, scrolled quickly, "They always sit on the thing you need most." You smile, because even centuries ago, people understood this strange little beast who could be both muse and menace. Historians still debate what these private sketches meant. Were they practice? Were they parody? Were they love letters in disguise? Probably yes, all of the above. You hand the portfolio back. The archivist is asleep now. The cat has not moved. You leave softly as the bell chimes once more, just a whisper this time. And the alley wraps itself back around you like a shawl. You're not quite sure where the city ends and the floating world begins anymore. But maybe there was never a line. Just cats quietly crossing it. You now find yourself walking alongside a canal, its waters like polished ink, reflecting not just the moon, but the soft lights of lanterns bobbing above it. The city is slowing. Even the crickets seem to pause between notes. You pass a small bridge, and halfway across, you stop. Not because anything dramatic happens, but because the stillness feels like a conversation worth listening to. Leaning on the railing, you notice something scratched into the old wood. It's faint, worn by weather and years of passing sleeves, but you can just make it out. A tiny sketch. A cat, in profile, wearing a scholar's cap, eyes closed, a scroll tucked beneath one paw. Underneath, just one word hastily etched. Sensei. Perhaps an artist drew it here long ago, pausing in the same spot you now stand. Perhaps it was a farewell. Or maybe just a joke between friends that survived longer than either of them. That's the thing with these cat prints. They live in the space between meanings. Sometimes parody, sometimes reverence, sometimes something else entirely. You continue over the bridge, and the houses on this side seem older, less touched by modern hands. Behind one rice paper window, you glimpse a room filled wall to wall with framed prints, cats of every shape, mood, and pose. And in the center of the room, a single empty cushion, waiting. Not for someone grand, not for a collector, just for anyone who needs to sit and look and feel the quiet absurdity of a cat acting like a person to remind a person how to rest like a cat. Some truths wear whiskers, and they speak not in meows, but in brushstroke. You're not sure how long you've walked now. The city has shifted again. Fewer lanterns, fewer footsteps. Even the wind seems to tread lightly here. Then you see it. A small tea house nestled under a cherry tree that's somehow still in bloom. The petals barely fall, just hover there, mid-air, like they're thinking it over. The tea house is old, not broken, just deeply relaxed. Inside, the shelves are filled not with teacups, but with ukiyo-e prints, rolled into scrolls and tied with silk string. A gentle woman greets you, not with a bow, but with a nod that says, "You're late, but that's perfectly all right." She doesn't ask what you're looking for. Instead, she reaches under the counter and pulls out a print that's already wrapped. "You should have this," she says softly, and hands it to you like it's a loaf of still warm bread. You unroll it carefully. It's
Simple. A single cat curled in a window, tail wrapped around its nose. Behind it, a faint outline of Mount Fuji. The title? Just one word. Waiting. No fanfare, no theatrical pose, just presence. The woman says, "This one was by an apprentice of Kuniyoshi. He only made a few. He liked to paint the moments after the drama ended." And isn't that just the perfect kind of moment? Historians barely mention this artist. The name Takuma appears only in footnotes. His prints rarely seen outside this neighborhood. But his cats? Oh, his cats linger. Soft, still, doing very little, saying very much. You thank her. She hands you a cup of something green and grassy and warm. And you sit. You sit with the print, with the tea, with yourself. And you start to forget that you were ever supposed to be doing anything else.
The cup of tea is still warm in your hands. Outside, the petals finally decide to fall, just one or two at a time, like careful punctuation. You leave the tea house, bow gently to the woman, who is already folding a cloth napkin like it holds a secret, and begin walking again. The streets are different now, not because they've changed, but because you have. Slower, softer, a little more like the cats you've met on paper and in person. Eventually, you come to a courtyard, empty but for a large wall made of wooden panels. Pinned to them, a gallery of prints, unframed, unmanned, quietly weathered by time. A small sign reads, "Community Cats, Anonymous Works." Here, no names, just images. A cat holding a lantern for a fox. A cat curled around a bowl of soup. A cat dramatically fainting in front of another cat who looks unimpressed. You giggle, softly. This wasn't high art. This was participation, playfulness, love disguised as ink. One panel shows a series of sleeping cats, each titled only with the season. Spring, cat in sunbeam. Summer, cat spread across floorboards like melting butter. Autumn, cat inside basket of chestnuts. Winter, cat not visible, buried inside futon. These weren't for critics. They were for each other. Prints pinned after a good meal, after a visit, after watching your cat do something so perfectly useless that it had to be immortalized. This was a wall of joy, of not taking yourself too seriously. Historians barely footnote this kind of work. Too domestic, too mundane, too silly. But here it lingers, because someone took the time to say, "I saw this little thing, and it mattered." Beyond the courtyard is a path lined with lanterns shaped like fish. They sway gently in the breeze, casting scales of light onto the cobblestones. You follow them without hurry. At the end of the path is a small pavilion, nothing fancy, just a circle of cushions, a low table, and a paper screen painted with, you guessed it, cats. But this one is different. It's a mural, a grand one. Spanning the entire screen, you see dozens of cats in motion. Not in costumes this time, not in parody, just cats, being cats, doing everything and nothing. One mid-yawn, one mid-leap, one mid-thought, staring at something far more profound than you'll ever understand. And at the center, a single brushstroke figure. Barely human, barely divine. A man with tousled hair, ink-stained sleeves, and 5 cats lounging around him like lazy disciples. It's Kuniyoshi, or at least the idea of him. And though it's not signed, you know who painted this. This mural wasn't for fame. It was left as a thank you to the artist who made people smile, who made people rest, who made people remember that even gods might want to nap sometimes. You sit on one of the cushions. It's warm, like it's been waiting. A breeze flows through the open pavilion, and the lanterns flicker like eyelids in mid-blink. You close your eyes for a moment. Just one. Just long enough to feel yourself in between times, in between stories, in between the cats on the screen and the ones that live in your memory. No one rushes you. No one needs anything. And somewhere, you think, one last cat is probably drawing you in a little book just to remember that you sat still long enough to see this. The night is thick now, not heavy, just full, like a blanket that's been pulled up just under your chin. You rise from the cushion and walk once more. This time, not through streets or galleries or bridges, but through something that feels more like memory. The buildings around you look familiar, but slightly wrong. The sky overhead is too close and too wide. The lanterns sway without wind. You are in a dream version of Edo now. The floating world, floating just a little higher. Here, cats walk upright, not in prints, but beside you. Some wear robes, some don't bother. One carries a pipe, but never smokes it. Another seems to be humming a tune you almost recognize. They pass you without fear. One stops, offers you a print. It's blank. But when you hold it, the lines begin to appear, like a brush remembering what it meant to do. First a tiny nose, then whiskers, then eyes that somehow look like someone you used to know. A self-portrait, perhaps, but not of your face, of your calm, of your small stillness, of the version of you that remembers to breathe before reacting, to watch before rushing. The cat nods and walks on, and you do too. This part of the city doesn't exist in maps. It exists in pauses, in the time between steps, in the space between brush and paper, where the idea hasn't quite landed yet, but it's close. You come to a house with no door. You step in. It's filled with cats, asleep on every surface. Not dramatic, just peaceful. One looks up at you and yawns, then closes its eyes again. And you understand. This is the shrine, not to Kuniyoshi, not to the art, but to the nap that follows it. The shrine is quiet, deep quiet. Not the silence of emptiness, but the hush of something sacred. Soft breathing, the twitch of a paw, a scroll slowly unrolling itself from gravity alone. You sit beside a low table, on it a teapot half full, and beside it one last print. You unroll it carefully. It's a final scene. 3 cats seated in a garden at dusk, sipping tea, saying nothing. The sky above them is streaked with falling petals and starlight. The title reads, "We have nowhere to be." And it's not funny, not even clever. It's true. A small plaque on the wall says the artist's name, but it's crossed out on purpose. Below it, a note, "Sometimes it's the art that matters, not who made it." You let that sit in your chest like a warm stone. You pour the tea, drink it slowly. It tastes like everything you didn't rush today. And then, softly behind you, you hear it. Not footsteps, not voices. The brush stroke, the sound of it. You turn, and there, across the room, is a figure painting on a rice paper wall. Their hand is steady, their eyes soft, their robe ink-stained and familiar. They look like every artist you've met tonight, and none of them, and also maybe you. They draw a final cat, sitting in moonlight, looking at nothing, perfectly still. The brush is set down, the painting dries, and the painter disappears, not rudely, just politely, as if they were never here at all. And perhaps they weren't. Because maybe, just maybe, you are the final brushstroke now. And maybe that's enough.
The Shrine of Naps doesn't ask anything of you. You could stay there forever, really. No one would complain. The cats certainly wouldn't. They haven't moved in what feels like 3 lifetimes. But something nudges you. Not urgency, just curiosity with a soft paw. You step outside, where the wind has picked up ever so slightly. It carries the scent of ink, warm stone, and fish grilled somewhere very far away. The street ahead seems unfamiliar. Not because it's new, but because it feels like the part of a story that was skipped the first time, a bonus scene, buried deep in a scroll. Here, the houses lean closer together, not from crowding, just old age. Their eaves droop like sleepy eyebrows. Their lanterns have stopped glowing, but somehow the street isn't dark. And here, at the end of the lane, is a sign hanging crookedly. Museum of Misfit Prints. No one guards the door. Inside, it smells like damp paper and wisdom that's gone slightly moldy. You're met with a long hallway. On the walls, rejected ukiyo-e, the forgotten drafts, the errors, the experiments. One cat has 2 tails. Another is accidentally upside down. One scene shows a cat attempting to play the shamisen and looking incredibly frustrated. The ink lines are perfect, but someone wrote in the margin, "Too relatable, might confuse the public." You chuckle. Here, in this secret museum, the mistakes breathe. Art that didn't sell, that confused censors, that was abandoned halfway through because someone's cat spilt ink on it. And it's perfect. You run your fingers along a frame that's cracked in one corner. Inside is a cat sleeping inside a teacup. The caption simply, "Mistake number 7." But it doesn't feel wrong. It feels like the kind of thing your mind holds on to in the dark. Soft. Strange. Worth keeping.
You round a corner in the Misfit Museum and find a tiny stairwell spiraling downward, more like a ladder with aspirations. You descend carefully, the steps creaking like they're telling secrets too old to matter now. At the bottom, another room, colder, quieter, lit only by a row of gently glowing lanterns shaped like carp. This room is different. The walls aren't covered in prints, they're lined with sketchbooks. Dozens, no, hundreds of them, all stacked in uneven piles, tied with fading string. You open one. Inside, hurried sketches of cats. Some elegant, some goofy, some just blobs with whiskers. One is titled, "He Fell Asleep Like This, and I Didn't Want to Wake Him." Another, "4 attempts to draw my cat not judging me. Failed." These weren't meant for display. These were personal, private, a kind of diary written in pause. You flip through more pages. A cat walking across a scroll, leaving perfect inky footprints. A cat knocking over a vase, captured mid-tip like an action shot slowed by affection. A cat curled around a sandal, deeply in love with it for reasons that remain unclear. Scholars barely cataloged these. They called them ephemera, marginalia, doodles. But you call them something else. Tenderness. The kind that doesn't ask for applause. Just a little space, a little string, a little sketch made in the hour between sunset and sleep. You gather a few more books into your arms, then pause. There, on the final page of one, is a self-portrait, not of the artist, but of the cat, looking at the viewer with a tiny smirk, one ear slightly bent, eyes half-lidded in the international feline expression for, "I knew you'd come." You laugh, quietly, and for just a moment, you feel like the cat's been telling this whole story.
You emerge slowly from the Museum of Misfit Prints, arms a little ink-dusted, eyes a little heavier. The air outside has changed. It's the blue-gray kind of night that feels like it's waiting for a bell to ring, or a thought to finish, or maybe just for you to pause long enough to notice it. You walk again, though it feels more like gliding now. Your feet are quiet. Your thoughts are quieter. Up ahead, you find a low garden wall with a bench tucked beside it. You sit. Because you want to. Because you can. Behind the wall, a small garden blooms, overgrown, a bit wild, but full of life. Peonies, moss, a lone bamboo stalk that refuses to stand straight. And in the center, of course, a cat. Sitting perfectly still, facing away from you, staring at nothing. Or maybe everything. It doesn't turn around, doesn't acknowledge you, but its presence is enormous. You realize, with a sleepy sort of wonder, that this is exactly the kind of cat Kuniyoshi would have drawn. Not because it was doing anything, but because it made doing nothing look like a philosophy. A concept, a choice, a practice. There's a print tucked beneath your arm still, one you barely remember accepting. You unroll it now, and it's that cat. Same pose, same stillness, same slightly crooked tail. The title, "He Knows Something I Don't, and He Won't Say." You set it in your lap and close your eyes, just for a moment, long enough to let the quiet finish the sentence. When you open your eyes again, you're somewhere else, still in Edo, still in the floating world. But the street now hums with something more playful. You're in a market square, but not the loud, bustling kind. This one's barely lit, gently shadowed, more suggestion than structure. A place that only exists when the city's asleep enough to imagine it. Stalls line the sides, but instead of food or fans or silks, they're selling art. Just art. All of it cats. One vendor offers paper masks shaped like sleepy kittens. Another sells tiny painted fans with cats fanning themselves on them. Yes, a fan of a cat holding a fan. There's music playing,
soft shamisen, interrupted occasionally by the quiet clink of porcelain and a giggle that may or may not have come from an actual cat. You stop at one stall. It's run by no one, just a table full of prints. A small sign reads, "Take what you need, leave what you don't." You pick up a woodblock titled, "Three Cats in Debate." They sit around a low table, one raising a paw, the others clearly disagreeing. No text, no answer. Just the moment of decision-making, suspended in perfect indecision. Another print, late for absolutely nothing. It shows a cat mid-run, but clearly faking urgency for dramatic effect. And finally, the artist interrupted. A hand drawing a cat, the cat batting the brush mid-stroke. You want to take them all, but instead, you leave one behind. A tiny sketch you found in your sleeve, maybe from the museum, maybe older. Just a curl of a tail and one paw reaching off the page. You tuck it into the corner of the table and walk on. Behind you, something shifts in the paper air. A stall closes, a cat nods, and the dream continues.
There's no rush now. Even the wind feels like it's walking beside you, not ahead. You pass a tiny bookshop next, if it can be called that. It's the size of a closet, and the door barely opens without making a sound like a politely coughing floorboard. Inside, piles, stacks, heaps. Not messy, not neat, just alive. Books leaning on books. Scrolls rolled up inside teapots. A ladder that leads nowhere but creaks with deep wisdom. And in the back, a small glowing alcove. A lamp. A cushion. And a wall entirely covered in hand-drawn cats. No fancy prints, no blocks. Just sketches. Dozens. Maybe hundreds. One drawn in charcoal, another in what looks suspiciously like tea. One drawn with a single line, the cat curled into itself like a sleepy pretzel. This is the studio of someone who didn't care about selling. Someone who didn't even care if the cats stayed on the page. They were practicing something else. Devotion? Maybe. Or attention. The kind of slow, present gaze that turns even a flicking tail into a meditation. You crouch down and find a book with no title. Inside, one phrase written over and over again, beneath dozens of different cats. This is enough. One is a cat loaf on a windowsill. Another is just a paw, elegantly crossed. You close the book and feel, perhaps for the first time all night, that you agree. This is enough. No more, no less. Just here. Just this. The street outside the bookshop is lined with stepping stones, each shaped like something small and improbable. A fish, a leaf, a paw. They lead you gently forward. The buildings grow thinner now, less structured, more suggestion than substance. You've slipped beyond the blueprint of the city, into a space drawn with softer lines. Up ahead is something strange. A gallery, outdoors. Just scrolls and prints strung from trees, rustling in the breeze like laundry, dreaming of being art. One print sways toward you. You steady it. A group of cats at a poetry reading. One clearly asleep, one overly dramatic, one trying not to laugh. Another print beside it. A cat seated before a mirror, holding a brush. The title? Self-Portrait, after being called just a pet. You reach up to straighten it, but hesitate. It's already perfect in its slight tilt. Nearby, a chime rings. Not metal, more like glass. You look up. A cat is sitting in a tree branch above the gallery, tail dangling, watching the print sway like it owns the exhibit, which of course it does. It blinks slowly at you, approvingly, and you realize, perhaps with a sleepy smile, that you're not just walking through a dream of art. You're part of the exhibition now. Your footprints, your breath, your eyes, all of it has been quietly added to the floating world. Somewhere, a brush has recorded you. Not perfectly, not even fully, just enough. A hint, a sketch. And that's all you need.
The prints continue to sway gently behind you, whispering stories to the leaves. You walk on. The path is barely a path now, just worn grass and the suggestion of footsteps from long ago. To your left, a pond. Still, deep. It reflects the stars, but shifts slightly, as though remembering different constellations from an older sky. There's a wooden dock, worn smooth by time and thought. You step onto it. At the end of the dock sits a small wooden box with a brush resting across it. You open the lid. Inside, scraps. Little pieces of unfinished prints, unused borders, practice strokes, failed paws. It should feel like refuse, but it doesn't. It feels like honesty. One corner of paper holds just a tail, expertly curled. Another shows a cat's face that's slightly off. The proportions aren't right. The expression too human. You love it instantly. There's even a tiny note in calligraphy. Not everything needs to be finished. You sit beside the box and look across the pond. The water ripples once, just once, like a sigh. And you get the sense that maybe the cats have moved on now. Or perhaps they were never really here. Perhaps you carried them with you, from the first brushstroke to the last paw print.
There's only one path now, and it narrows into silence. The trees grow tall above you, like columns in a paper temple. And just ahead, just there, a final gate, torii-shaped, painted in ink, not wood. It stands without foundation, a gesture, a threshold. You step through, and now you're in the studio. Not a studio, the studio. The one you've imagined every time you looked at a scroll and wondered who made it. Low walls, tatami mats, a window with no view but light, a cup half full of water for cleaning brushes, a cat curled beneath the table. And there, on the floor, an unfinished print. The cat in it is mid-step, not quite walking, not quite still. It looks familiar, like a cat you saw earlier, like a thought you meant to remember, like you. The brush beside the print is still wet, as though someone just left for tea and never came back. You kneel, slowly, Not to finish it, just to be near it. You breathe in the scent of old ink and quiet wood. And you stay there, long enough to forget what else there was, long enough to feel the weight of all the gentle jokes, all the failed pause, all the deeply personal nonsense that made these cats more human than anyone dared admit, long enough to become part of the story, one brushstroke among many, one curl of a tail in the margins.
The studio does not fade. It simply quiets. You stay a while, long enough to let the edges blur. Outside the window, the sky has turned that pale lavender shade that comes just before dawn or just before forgetting. A soft creak behind you. You turn. A figure enters. Not Kuniyoshi, not a monk, not even a cat. Just someone. Wearing soft robes, carrying a tray with tea and a scroll. They don't speak. They simply bow, set the tray beside you, and begin to unroll the scroll onto the floor. You peer at it. It's a long, flowing piece, panels stitched together like waves, one image flowing into the next. At first, cats in markets, cats in inns, cats lounging beneath plum trees. Then, cats in disguise, dressed as samurai, as geisha, as fishmongers, as poets. And finally, cats as themselves, sitting, sleeping, prowling rooftops under a crescent moon. But slowly, their forms blur. Their ears dissolve into brushstrokes. Their eyes become soft pools of ink. Their tails disappear into fog. And the final image? A completely blank panel. Just paper and a tiny paw print in the corner. You look up, but the figure is gone. Only the tea remains. Still warm. Still waiting. You drink it slowly, letting each sip carry a memory of prints, of paw pads, of all the silly, sacred moments spent wandering a world where cats reminded humans how to pause. Not stop, just pause.
And now the story draws to a close. Not with a bang, not even with a final brushstroke, but with the hush that follows when a cat leaves the room, and you're not sure when they left, only that they're no longer beside you. The floating world of Edo recedes like low tide. The scrolls roll themselves back into sleep. The paper trees fold gently. The wind forgets your name and continues down a different alley. All that remains is the echo of silk footsteps and the scent of dried ink. You find yourself walking once more, barefoot now, through a long corridor of screens, each one painted with a scene from the night. There's the garden cat, the rooftop poets, the mask seller, the shrine where dreams napped, and one final panel. A cat, curled in a circle, eyes closed, breathing slow. The title reads, "You, at last." You smile, because maybe that's the whole point. Not to become an expert, not to finish the scroll, just to arrive, softly, sleepily, at yourself. The paper rustles. The lantern dims. The world folds. And finally, gently, you rest. Still, safe. Drawn in ink and silence. Good night.